All right. So does anybody want to share anything with us?
I didn't get a chance to see the recording. I watched about half of it last night, but I didn't get the other half because I was wanted to catch some of the language that seemed to not make sense to me. I can't remember what I'm just trying to read it right now. It didn't, it like sort of in the middle. It got a little fuzzy. I mean, I understand the words, but it's like still I find when I read these texts, there's always something missing in it, just enough for me to not to understand it. you
You
know
mean you mean the,
so
the Sefer Chinuch you're talking about? What we're reading through?
yeah, Sefer Chinuch.
Hmm.
No, I mean all learning is like that. That's why I'm happy about this class. This is exactly my problem. Is that I have enough Hebrew to be dangerous, and when I start to translate stuff, I've heard it more than one time, people telling me that that's a really good interpretation. I never heard that one before, and I have no idea how you came up with that, but it sounds pretty good. But that's not what it says. I think you might even told me that sometime.
Yeah,
so,
it's
you
fun.
know,
It's a freestyle translation.
yeah,
Uh,
right.
was there anything
So,
specific? Is there anything you can point to say like I don't understand how this
well,
connects or
let me just look it over. Let's just read it over. It's a small ketta, so
hmm.
Let me just take a look in here. I got the Dina mitzvot mutela. Okay, that one I got. Became milata badim biyela de bay. Okay, we got that. V'chiluk shem medhem be'eze inyan dochin b'shvil Shabbat. So that one there is the difference between them is really in regards to Shabbat and Yom Tov. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is a loose. Okay, and then Eza Katan Mishihin Milta Yoter. And then we're talking about a Katan who's going to like push off his Brit Milah, more than 8 days, and there's like some additional uh, details that's discussed in Parak Yatet and Shabbat, right? It tells you the place, but Parak
Right. It's
Dalit.
the sentence itself is slightly confusing because it's almost a run-on sentence. It's just kind of a list. All the things that what is dinah mitzvah? Well, there's this and there's that and there's somebody trying to get in.
Right. So
Um,
then
so it's a
and it shows you where I'm old. Okay, so it's really telling us like the difference. What is that? How you're going to make the bracha, right? In terms of is that going to be like? Do I understand it that there's a different bracha for someone who's like an Evid Kanani and um, versus like who's a Jew? Because you see
he
one who's
doesn't
going to be
get into that. He doesn't
okay.
get
I
into the
understand.
bracha for an Eved Kanani. He just talks about the fact that it's different for an Eved Kanani.
No, it doesn't. Isn't that shows the difference? No, because if you say "V'sham b'Shabbat nitbar ki amal b'varech Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'am asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivana ala milah," and then it's and the father and a Beit Din that's what they're going to say for probably the standard issue Kanani, right? And then we have the Av and the Beit, the Av or the Beit Din. We're talking about a Yid now, probably. This is where I'm, going off into my own translations,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. You're going. This is the freestyle. Now you're freestyling. Um,
So I
okay.
told you I was dangerous.
Yeah. So this whole paragraph is talking about the bracha and what follows the bracha, but it's all talking about a regular brit milah.
So
There's
what's the
no
difference here? And the Av Beit Din b'makom she'ein Av ein mivarachim. Oh, so if there isn't an Av, so mivarachim b'chot Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvah v'tzivana lehikniso b'brit l'shavram vinu.
yeah, but it's you have to understand the phrasing. The Beit Din, it's like when the father slash the Beit Din, this is what they say. They're saying the same thing. There's just two options
Uh-huh.
for who's going to say it. If it's an orphan and Beit Din is taking care of him, then they also take care of the Brit Milah. And
So
then
what are the
somebody, a
difference between these?
representative of the Beit Din, would say the bracha instead of the father.
Oh, but so what are the difference between these two brachas, if any? You know, or is it part of the same formula, or are we talking? You know, why do we have two different brachot here?
Oh, right. So we did briefly go over this. The first bracha, the Sefer Chinuch says, Hamal mevarech. Okay, it was Hamal, the person doing the milah.
Right.
Nowadays, that's a moel, whoever makes the cut, right? So that's the first bracha, and the second bracha is the father, because it's his responsibility to make sure the
Ah,
mitzvah
okay.
happens. So they're
Got it.
two different. They're actually
Okay.
two different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, mom mivarech. Okay, I missed that part. Okay, I see
Right.
it.
You have to
Yeah,
read all the
got it.
words,
Okay.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
the
Unless you're making up your own stuff.
they're two different layers in the mitzvah, right? There's
Right. I see
the
it. I see it.
mitzvah act, and then there's the covenant that is sealed by doing it. Right? The covenant is there even if
Right.
you don't, right? Every Jew has this covenant with Hashem by way of being a part of the family of Avraham Avinu. But when we go through with the act and do the circumcision, then we're showing that we're like pledging our we're making our pledge to the covenant. We're saying, yeah, this is my commitment. I'm showing how committed I am. I'm willing to
I think I lost
mar
it.
my children. You okay? Oh, I think we lost it.
Mm.
Still got too much for him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. So
Why
you
is it
caught all
doing
that,
that?
right? All while you were gone.
Yeah. Well, I made up my own version of it while you guys were gone. Don't worry.
All
So,
right.
okay.
Okay. Does that set you straight? They clear
I
now?
think you have a question here by
Yeah.
Deborah.
Yeah, we're good.
You done, Abram?
Yeah, yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Is there any parallel between circumcision and the Akedah? I mean, there's a lot of similar things going on there. Could there be something? You've got the covenant, you've got the knife, you've got the father bringing the son, you've got a kind of sacrifice.
There is the midrashic sources tell us that the sandak is the altar. That the ma'amad brit, when we have a brit milah, it's actually a reenactment of the akedah. Absolutely. There is a take like that. That's a reenactment of the akedah, and that's why the sandak, his legs are the altar, and then his hands are the binding. It's a hold the baby, right? There's a mitzvah, the sandak. It's not like a separate mitzvah. It's not one of the Taryag mitzvah, but it's an Indian. It's a halacha that the sandak is supposed to hold the baby's limbs, just like the binding of Yitzchak Avinu, right? The akedah is the binding, so he's holding him down so that he doesn't move during the incision. Incision is just like the sacrifice that was supposed to happen. So there are a lot of parallels, and figuratively, the parallel is clear that this is, like I just said, I'm pledging my allegiance, my commitment to this covenant by saying, here, look, I'm willing to sacrifice my child, not the whole child, but in a very minor fashion. I'm willing to go through this, even though I know it causes pain to my child and to the child's mother sometimes. Rob, we can't hear you. Oh, maybe he's not talking to us.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have Abraham breaking away from, he was like the first person to break away from Terach's generation, which was the idol worship, which was the child sacrifice. So it's almost as if the Akedah is kind of like that first, like the template to replace child sacrifice with, the Brit Milah, a more humane way of offering your child. It's just an idea that came to me.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of things like that where we take the same sort of thing that was done in a very Hamei context and we make it holy, even though it's a very similar act, because the intent is very different. And so when we almost sacrifice our children, whether it's Akedat Yitzchak or it's a Brit Milah, we're actually saying this is something that is so precious to me. I'm going to take the thing that's most precious to me and I'm going to offer it up as a part of this relationship. And the idolatry version of that is I'm going to take something that's so precious to me, and by destroying it, I'm going to gain favor in the eyes of um, this whimsical, right? This kind of figure that of power that I have to impress it, right? I have to impress this God, so to speak, this um, divine figure by showing it like how much I care about you. I care about so much. I'm gonna kill my child, right? And that's something that we see persists in the story. We see it in the story of Yosef when Shimon is locked up in Egypt and Yosef demands they bring down Binyamin, and then Reuven says, "Hey, look, if I don't bring him back, you can kill my two sons." What does that mean?
Mhm.
That doesn't make any sense. How is that going to help anything? He's saying, like, I'm so committed to this, I'm willing to put my children's lives on the line as a proof that I'm going to follow through. And that's the kind of thing that um, that we use all the time. You see it. I don't know. Most people don't actually say things like that, but it's something that's understandable as a human reaction to something to take to in order to take when extreme measures are necessary, right? You say like I'm willing to sacrifice the most precious thing to me in order to preserve this relationship or in order to attain something, and that's what it is. Um, so people who say like now there's a big in the US and I think in Europe also anti-circumcision movement, right? That like you're marring your children, you're maiming whatever it is. Well, they're right, but we we're doing that intentionally.
It's kind of a funny thing, right? That they don't mind like, mutilating themselves because they think they're something they're not. That's
Well,
okay.
their issue is that there's no consent. You don't get consent from the child, right? If the child agreed to it, then they'd be fine with it. The problem is that you're taking this baby, and then they take it to the extreme, of course. With I don't know. I saw somebody posted recently, some child suing her parents for having her or something. You didn't ask my consent before you brought me into the world.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
this is the Yoda without Torah, right?
yeah.
I went once. I was at Venice Beach, and I had this run-in with some of those. They're called Jews. I call them Jews for junk. So they had a booth down there, and I told them I'm coming with my booth. So I went down there with my booth the next Sunday, and it was very funny because it's very difficult to get a place, because it's your freedom of speech. So everybody's got their thing, their tables over there. So it was Hashgacha Prati. There was a space next to them, and who do you think was the guy on the other side? Was anti-circumcision. So I put my little booth and a little table down, and I made mine was Jews for Shabbos. And yeah, I'm sure you're surprised at that. And the so the guy comes out, see what I'm doing, and I'm thinking, okay, here we go, man. He's coming to give me a hard time. And he comes, peace. He's like, peace, brother. I'm like, okay. He says, listen, man, you guys are the only real people, the people that should be doing this. He says, I'm talking about the Goyim. I said, it ain't cool what they're doing to the Goyim. He says, you guys, man, you got any problems, man? You come to me, I'm with you.
Yeah. So there's one little thing I wanted to share in our class last Monday, we ran across this phrase, Avi Ben, and I said I'd find some other examples. And I remembered the one that stood out to me is in Parashat Bereshit, actually, when we're going through the latter half of Parashat Bereshit and goes through like all the generations, and it's just kind of a bunch of list of names, and then occasionally something beyond that will be mentioned about a particular generation. So the first Lemech, there were two Lemechs. One was Noach's grandfather, I think, and there was the first Lamech who was much earlier, I think 6 generations earlier, or something like that. And his children are talked about more extensively. He has the whole. His children are called Tuval Cain and Naama, right? And it says U Avi Kol Tofes Nevel Vechinor, right? That Tuval Cain was the first one to make musical instruments, and it uses that same construct of Avi Kol. It's a smichut. He was the father, so to speak, of all musicians, and he was the he was the first musician or something like that, and it says Avi Kol. So that's just another example in the Torah that we have of that construct. Something we can pay attention to next time we get to Parashat Bereshit. And if anybody doesn't know, there are no more questions or discussions. I guess we could go on a little bit. Yeah.
All right, so when it comes to the supremacia, okay, la'at, okay. So on Shabbos is usually when I remember to take it out. So of course I can't like write down the words and stuff on Shabbat, but I need to, I guess, maybe find a different text. I get just so annoyed by the way it's written. It really, I would rather read the Sefer. Wait, what are we reading? Sefer Chinuch or Sefer Mido? What it's called? Sefer Chinuch. Yeah, I'd rather and much more understand that than the Sipur Maasiyot. I don't know what to do. Like I want to read them. It's just they're written in such a funny way. I don't know. Do you have any advice?
There are other texts you can pick up. The Sipur Masiot has its own peculiarities because it's translated from Yiddish, and then
Yeah,
a lot of the kind of ways of saying things in Yiddish just gets translated straight over without
yeah.
properly reworking them. There is a book that I found in the Merkaz Torani called Niflei Masech. It's a book written by the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai was the Rav of Baghdad.
Which one?
It's called Niflei Masecha. It's on the bookcase outside the kollel in the hallway, and it's they're nice. They're like Sipurei Tzadikim, Sipurei Muftim, and I think it's an easy read, and it's also I think a good choice.
Koasu Chachamim is good.
Kosu Chachamenu is not bad, but Kosu Chachamenu is a little simplistic.
Famous stories.
I mean, yeah, depending on where you're at, it could work for you. It's written for children.
We have like,
what's that?
oh, I think we have like Sipurei Habesht or something. Maybe I could try that.
Yeah, you can. You could try Sipurei Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Sipurei Masiot is not for everyone, I guess. Okay. So I think we'll do like 5 minutes of history of Torah Shebaal Peh. We were talking about the Zugot, and we were talking about the first Machloket. So if we're already getting into the period of Chachamim that are mentioned in the Mishnah. And from the Mishnah, we have this transition. I mean, this is before the Mishnah is written down. But from that period, the Tanaitic period, the time of the Tanaim, we have a transition to the Gemara. I'm leaping way ahead. I'm going to come back. But these are different periods, and they're oftentimes lumped together because when a person learns Gemara, so you have Tanaim and Amoraim, and you have this like, I don't know, 600 or 700 year period that's included in the Gemara. And it's kind of not always self-evident that they were not all at the same time. They're not all to be related to the same way, all the different Chachamim. So the kind of progression starts when we have, like we said there, the Zugot, who were the Aveitin, and then the C. The C also was a sort of a public figure, not just a halachic figure. He was also a public figure. He was the representative of the Torah for that generation, for all sorts of political contexts. And when we get to around the latter Hashmonaim period, the 2 or 3 generations after the story of Hanukkah, we see that there's a lot of tension between the rabbinical establishment and the political establishment, where we have, for instance, Yanai HaMelech. He went to war. He had a lot of conflict with the Chachamim, and he killed almost all of them off. He had them
Who is
executed.
this?
Yanai. His name was Yanai Alexandros. Yanai Alexander, the king, and he was, I think, the 2 generations after Matityahu's sons. So Yehuda, Maccabee, Shimon, Elazar, all those. He was a grandson of one of them, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a period where we already see, I mean, the Hellenism started obviously before that. That's what Hanukkah was all about. But we see Hellenism continued to creep in to the point where there was a large faction of Jews who adopted some of the Greek beliefs and applied it to Judaism. And they were called the Tzdukim. And they followed a guy named Tzadok. That's where the name comes from. Tzadok was kind of the big, a very influential figure, and he was into Greek philosophy, and the Greek philosophy held that there's no olam haba, right? What you have, there's no divine reward and punishment. What you have in this world is what you get. And that was one of the main things that they rejected from rabbinical Judaism. As we know, if we look in the Torah, there are no clear mentions of olam haba. No unequivocal mentions.
Reminds me of the conservative movement. I'm sorry, reminds me of the conservative movement that I grew up in.
Yeah. It's very different, right? It kind of sounds like it, but it's not, because they were very radical. The conservative movement is like, okay, there's rabbinical Judaism, but we don't have to take it that seriously. Whereas the Tzdukim took it very seriously, and they were extreme, and there was a lot of fighting about it, particularly in the context within the Beis Hamikdash. So the Tzdukim rejected the idea of olam haba, and punishment, divine reward and punishment, and also Torah Sheba'al Peh. They've rejected the Chachamim in general, saying that Torah Sheba'al Peh doesn't have legitimacy, it doesn't have a real hold. And it was in this period that we see that the Torah, the Chachamim worked very hard to try to ground Torah Sheba'al Peh in Torah Shebichtav. So we see there are midrashim. If we open up a midrash halacha, in general, midrashim come in two flavors: halacha and agadah. So most of the time, when people say, "Oh, there's a story in the midrash," all the stories come from the agadah side of the midrash. But there's also halachic midrash, which is the same word midrash. Midrash means that I'm drawing something out from the pasuk that's not obviously there, right? So you can draw it out in order to tell a story and try to figure out what happened reading between the lines in the story, or I can try to draw it out to figure out what the finer details of a mitzvah are. And the midrashei halacha are full of these very, very fine nitpicking. It doesn't sound like a nice word to use, but when you read it, it feels like I'm really nitpicking at the wording and the phrasing of each word in psukim that are discussing mitzvot, in order to say, oh, look, the Torah had this in mind. The things that are in Torah Sheba'al Peh, the written Torah also had them in mind, because there was a war going on, and they needed to really fortify their position in saying that the Torah Sheba'al Peh is a part of the Torah, is no lesser than Torah Shebichtav. And this battle started at that time, shortly after the events of Hanukkah, which was something like 2,200 years ago. And they continued on into this day. And we're going to see throughout history that there are ups and downs, and there are all sorts of movements that spring up to try to take a stand against the Chachamim, against Torah Sheba'al Peh, trying to challenge its legitimacy. And there's a tremendous amount of rabbinical literature that is just trying to fight back. It's just trying to fortify that position and show that all these things that you think, oh, they're made up, so to speak. Well, no, they're right there in the text. You accept the text, so then you have to accept this also, basically. So we're going to see how that plays out over the course of history, and how that affects all sorts of things and all sorts of the body of rabbinical Judaism. I think we'll stop here. I had to mute you, Devorah Gila.
Oh, can I say something?
Yeah.
I read somewhere that when Mashiach comes, the rabbinical Torah is going to be considered like Doraita. Is that right?
Well, a lot of it is considered Doraita. You bring up a very, very good point, something we should go over, which is the kind of the gradations within the oral tradition. There are things that are Doraita, there are things that are sort of in between Derabanan and Doraita, and there are things that are, and then there are all sorts of grades of Derabanan. So that's something I'll try to get into next time. Yeah. That's a good point. Okay, so I guess we're done.
Thank you.
Hope to see you tomorrow night.
See everyone tomorrow. Yeah.